Studio 50 to us.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of The Backside of Water, a podcast that delves into the rich history, awesome stories, and fascinating details behind your favorite Disney attractions. I'm Alex Stewart.
And I'm Annie Rugit, and on this special mini episode, we will be continuing our love for the wonderful world of Alice in Wonderland by covering the topsy-turvy story of the Mad Tea Party attraction.
Which is interesting because I personally don't know anybody who actually calls this attraction the Mad Tea Party. Instead, most just simply call it the Teacups, or many also refer to it as its formal name, the Spew Fest Disney Edition.
Very true. But even though it is a stomach-churning ride, it's still a classic.
I agree. Everybody loves the Teacups, except for folks like my wife who get sick just watching the thing. I mean, the type of attraction has been a classic at amusement parks facilities since the dawn of, amusement park facilities. The one thing I find surprising, though, is that there really isn't a lot of information about this attraction. In fact, there was significantly less information about this attraction than any other we have ever researched on this show, which shocked me.
Yeah, I find that surprising, too, because it is a really beloved ride. Although, I admit, I haven't ridden it since I was a kid because my tummy now hurts when I ride it.
Do you get sick?
I feel very uncomfortable. We'll say that. I've never actually, seen my lunch, but...
Have you ever had a pleasant experience on the Teacups, or has it all been just gut-wrenching?
I loved it. When I was a kid, I loved it. And I wanted to go as fast as I could, but I don't know, like around 13 or 14, I've never felt the same.
It's adolescence, Annie. Adolescence made you sick.
It messes you up, makes you a wimp.
It is weird because I feel like I remember specifically standing in my front yard as a kid. I was probably 10 years old, and I would just spin. I would look up into the air and just spin for, 20, 30 minutes. And I would do it just to see how dizzy I could get. And I never, ever once felt sick or wanted to throw up. Yet now... here I am 33 years old. If I turn too quickly with my child, I'm like, oh gosh, that's a little much.
It's because of your vertigo. That's what happens. You get older and you have vertigo. So, little things will just trigger it and make it worse. Your dizziness.
To be fair,
Al, you should go get that checked out.
It may stem back from that chase that I did on the roof with that perpetrator back when I was a detective in San Francisco. And the dude fell off the roof and the deputy fell off also. I haven't been the same since.
You haven't been the same since. I remember that accident. You didn't talk to me for like a week.
Yeah,
You were in shock. But anyway, back to the Teacups, because...
Let me just say, I'm really impressed that that's the first time that I've ever been able to slide in some sort of Alfred Hitchcock reference. So sorry. we digress.
And we're just going to talk instead about teacups and the information that you were able to find. Because I know you said it was a little tough, but...
It was.
Why don't we go down that rabbit hole and go on an adventure?
I like the idea of that. So let's do that right now. The Mad Tea Party was inspired by the unbirthday scene in Walt Disney's Alice in Wonderland. This iconic scene would set the stage for Imagineers to riff off of one of the most classic carnival rides in history, the spinning attraction. Whether it was something like a tilt-a-whirl or the spider-type attraction, carnival goers loved to spin. And that's what I just wonder is, again, going back to what we were just talking about, why do people love to spin so much?
Well, I do know from observing kids that kids love to spin, and I think that because kids love to spin, it must just be like having your perception of reality kind of feel altered, your state feel altered. It's like, ooh, that was weird and different.
I could see that. I could definitely see that.
I also, interesting fact, the whirling dervishes, if you know of these this practice. These men would spin around, and it was like a meditative experience. And yeah, there's something to spinning.
I've never heard of the whirling dervishes.
Yeah, look up whirling dervish. It's like a spinning dance, and it's really amazing how fast they spin. It's almost like, you can't believe it. It's like, are they non-human?
Is it faster than Nancy Kerrigan? Nobody's faster than Nancy.
Nancy. Well, no one can beat Nancy, but Nancy was on ice skates.
Nan. We're on the terms where I just call her Nan.
I don't know. I'm more of a...
Don't you say it. Don't you say it. Don't you utter the words Tanya.
Tanya fan. Tanya rules. Okay, anyway. The whirling dervishes spin without ice skates, Al, faster, about as fast as Nancy Kerrigan, and maybe as fast as Tanya Harding.
And they don't get dizzy?
Well, they transcend that. It's a meditative practice. It's incredible. You should look it up.
I don't want to sound insensitive, but I could transcend that dizzy feeling by just not doing it.
I'm with you there.
Maybe I've cracked the code. But there is something about that. And I think that this spinning obsession is something that Walt noticed the theme of at the majority of the parks that he visited while doing his research for Disneyland.
Yes. Yeah. And naturally, one of the spinning type attractions would have to grace the interiors of his Disneyland park, right? Because they were so beloved. But it had to have the perfect theme and execution. It would make sense that they would choose the Mad Tea Party due to its chaotic and crazy nature. The idea then progressed into riders boarding a teacup that would take them on a journey to match the chaos of said party. But the real question now is how do you execute this journey? Like, imagine being back then, being Walt. Like, how do you make it feel like you've actually gone into this world?
Well, I think that's really the interesting thing, because when we talk about all these other theme park attractions, they really were about the feeling, the experience. Whereas I think Walt inherently, as we can see throughout this entire show and through the entire park, had the idea of immersion in mind. How can we get people to be a part of the story instead of just witnessing the story? And I think that also came down to everything from what do the vehicles look like, what does the floor look like, what does the area, the queue area around that attraction look like. And the first versions of this attraction were actually significantly more wild and crazy than any that you see around the world today in Disney parks.
See, I think that's crazy. Well, I think that's crazy because I feel like Disneyland has such wild and crazy creative ideas that it's like they were, monumental. How I would love to see the older versions.
Well, and here's what I'll also say is I think that with progression also comes restraint, not only from past experience, but also from legal requirement. Because these early drawings were teacups circling a centralized point and traveling around that point, but it came with banked curves so that the cups could really hug the corners as they went around. And it looked more like a racetrack than a spinning attraction like we see today. And because of that, I think that we don't take into account the safety factor. That whiplash is a very real condition that people suffer with. And again, we also have to realize in context that these WED employees at the very beginning that were designing these things were generally animators first and idea people first and engineers second, or if at all. And because of that, I think that their ideas were more radical and outrageous because they were thinking way outside the box. And I think that there's definitely something to be said about that, because that somebody like a WED employee who starts out as an animator can look at something and say, man, wouldn't this be awesome, without having any of those restraints first and foremost by saying like, oh, well, what about safety? What about accessibility? What about timing? What about volume? What about all these different things that somebody who has a background in that design area would have? And I think that's what was honestly something magical and brilliant about that early WED team is they really were lauded for their ignorance. And I don't want that to sound crude and rude, but they were lauded for their ignorance and the fact that they had no boundaries in which they worked.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think that unadulterated creativity came out of that. And that's why one of the contributing factors to why Disney was so incredibly awesome.
Yeah, I like what you were talking about, and that actually would be a really exciting environment creatively to be in a place where it's like, let's not worry about real life for a second. Let's just come up with the coolest ideas of what this could look like or what kind of, world and attraction you'd want to walk into, and then refine it slowly to fit, real necessities. Because, the cool thing is that with the teacups, they have landed on something that is fairly comfortable if you want it to be.
Oh, yeah.
You're still spinning around, but it's not like almost everybody can go on it and probably not feel terrible as long as you're not spinning the darn thing.
Yeah, well, and it's one of those that's really interesting because you can tailor your own experience. That's very rare to see in a Disney park, is being able to be the one in control of what you're experiencing on the attraction.
Yes. Yeah. Another early concept drawing also featured the Mad Hatter's table at the center of an attraction, while a group of 20 teacups spun haphazardly around the table. And this idea of teacups spinning around a centralized point seemed to be a theme among the early Imagineering concepts.
For sure. Well, and finally, the team settled on the teacups concept that we know and love today. Well, or I should say, know and love and fear today. The team now had the concept and theme in place, and now all they needed to do was make the dream a reality. The WED team tasked infamous Aero Development to do all the engineering work on the attraction. Hopefully by now, Aero Development is starting to sound more familiar to our longtime listeners, as they're responsible for building and executing an entire fleet of Disney attractions.
The Mad Tea Party attraction would consist of 3 small turntables that would spin in a clockwise manner, with one of the giant turntables for a floor that would rotate in a counterclockwise direction. And this simple decision to spin the top discs one way and the bottom disc another way would be the cause of thousands of motion sickness experiences over the past 6 decades.
It is really amazing that such a simple concept can cause so much disturbance within the human brain.
Oh, dear golly, yes. And I actually didn't know this about the ride. So that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? It's so kind of works together seamlessly that you kind of forget what happened. You're just in the madness.
You take it for granted. You definitely take it for granted as a writer because, again, you're so focused on the experience that you're not focusing on how it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is why it's so brilliant. I love it. And so each one of these smaller turntables would be able to house about 6 teacups, and this meant that the attraction could hold 18 total teacups. The WED team performed a calculation that determined a 1 minute and 32-second ride duration and would provide maximum guest capacity and satisfaction.
Which is, again, one of those things that I think is really interesting. So I'll do a plug for a show that I really have been enjoying lately. It's called the Themed Attraction Podcast, and it is hosted by our buddy Freddie Martin and one of his friends, Mel McGowan. And they are both really, really adept at getting to the heart of what makes an attraction so good. And it really is a podcast that focuses more on the nuts and bolts. So Freddie was a former Jungle Cruise skipper, like both of us, and Mel was actually an Imagineer for many years. And Mel now, I believe he was the founder of the company that he works for now, which is, I'm pretty sure it's called Storyland Studios. And essentially from my understanding, what they do is they take the concepts of theming an amusement enterprise of some sort and take that to local businesses and organizations and helps them execute it in that way. But on this podcast, they talk all about more of the nuts and bolts sides of things, where a lot of people wouldn't think about things like guest capacity and satisfaction. But when you listen to this podcast, they actually turn a conversation like that could sound really mundane into something that's really fascinating, simply because they're talking to the people who have created these attractions.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm going to have to check that out.
Absolutely. Everybody, you should
Yeah.
listen to the Themed Attraction
The theme
podcast.
attraction. Yeah, it makes you probably appreciate the fact that like this ride only lasts a minute and a half. As we were
Well,
talking
because it
about.
seems like a
there's
lifetime on there.
Yeah, and it's the right amount. I mean, if it feels like a lifetime and it's a minute and a half, then imagine what 2.5 minutes would feel like.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Hell.
That is a very good point.
So it's, the people really think through this stuff, and there's a reason why there's a reason why we go to Disneyland. Like, people go all the time and ride the same rides over and over. Have you ever thought about that?
That is a very good point, that you would think that enough already, but we
Yeah.
never get enough already.
No. It seems to just like time will stand still.
I love it.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild thing. And I was just at Disneyland with my parents last weekend, and I thoroughly enjoyed riding Peter Pan for probably like the 50th time in my life. It's incredible to me. But yeah, that's why a great attraction it just
Allows you to
breathes-
ride. It's like it's a great book. It's a great movie. It's a great song. There's something magical
It's
about
almost
it.
better than a great book, because I don't want to even read my favorite books more than a couple times.
Well, and I think that's
So.
the interesting thing too, because
Yeah.
when it comes down to the concept of time management, I mean, a book is going to be 15 hours. Gosh, I can't tell you how many times I thought I'm going to reread the Harry Potter series and have
I
not
know.
gotten through it because it's a 20-year adventure. It feels
Yeah,
like.
it will be at this point with those 7 books. Good Lord.
Yeah. But I think that's a really good point, that there is something to be said about short and sweet.
Yes.
I think that's a great concept.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. So moving back onto the WED team, they chose to install the teacups directly behind King Arthur's carousel, right in the middle of the action in Fantasyland. I mean, a lot of us know this. You walk kind of directly by the teacups, kind of while you're going through Fantasyland and around it.
Yeah. And that's the weird thing, is because here it was directly behind pretty much where Dumbo is right now. That was spread out, and the teacups were put directly behind there. So we'll talk later on how they were shifted over away from that place because they're not in that same line anymore.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I actually didn't...
Does that make sense where they were placed?
Yes, that makes sense now. Because they're still kind of in a central location.
Well, yeah, they're centralized more so back towards It's a Small World and Matterhorn, whereas before it was King Arthur's Carousel, and then directly past that, if you were walking through the castle and kept walking, you would walk past the King Arthur's Carousel, and you would be right at the teacups right there.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So tell us why it, what happened when it was back there.
Well, the final design and execution of the Mad Tea Party went off without a hitch. There really were no stories. But really, there was something that was missing, and that thing that was missing was color. When this attraction first opened on July 17th, 1955 at the rest of the park, it looked significantly different than it does today. On opening day, only half the teacups were decorated. And most of the spinning plates that the teacups were mounted on weren't colored either. Now, it's interesting to note also that at this point, the teacups didn't even have doors installed on them. Instead, a small, thin rope was used to lock people into their spinning cup of death, which I think is great.
Oh, no.
Not great, but I love how much of a time capsule that shows that moment was. It's
That
like,
OSHA
okay,
didn't
this-
come in and just
Exactly.
shut them down.
This was so pre-OSHA that they're
Yep.
like, a rope will be enough.
Yeah, they should know.
And one thing
don't
that I would be
stand up.
curious about, I would be curious to see what kind of incident reports they have, if there were any incidents. Now, the interesting thing also would be that it would be a couple of months before the final touches of color would be added to the attraction, and quite a while after that before the teacups were equipped with the doors. In fact, a part of me wants to say that the doors weren't even installed on the teacups until the 1982-83 refurbishment of Fantasyland. I could be wrong, but in the research that I saw of all the pictures, I don't think that rope was gone until the 80s.
Until that late in the game. Wow. Well, speaking of safety, it's also kind of interesting to note that for the first couple of years of the operation, the teacups had no brakes either, or governors.
Ooh.
Ugh,
Now,
essentially, go ahead.
I didn't even think about this. Governors could be an insider term, and I don't even know if you know what a governor is, Annie. Not somebody who runs a state. But
I thought it was someone who ran the teacup state.
Yeah, I am the leader of the
person?
teacup state.
Yeah, he could wear like a hat like the Mad Hatter and just overlook the ride and govern.
He was part of the aristocracy.
Oh,
get it, T.
Gross, Al.
That was bad. That wasn't gross. That was
so
bad.
So what is a governor? You caught me. I was reading the script.
No, that's what we don't have a script, Annie. We've never had a script. Wink, wink. So a governor is actually something that limits the speed at which something can go. I mean, even vehicles to this day have governors on them. So when you hit the gas, it's not like you can just run that sucker until it goes all the way. And so at this point, there was nothing controlling the speed at which people could spin on the teacups.
Wow. That's makes me very uncomfortable thinking about how that ride used to feel.
Well, it's kind of discouraging now to me because whenever we go, we make it a goal to see how quickly we can spin. And now understanding that there is some sort of higher force literally working against us in our effort of becoming one with some sort of light speed spin is a little depressing.
Keeping you guys from spinning and knocking people off the ride.
And proving string theory correct.
Yeah, losing control of your teacup.
Becoming part of the multiverse.
Yeah.
It's also interesting to note that the wheel that you spend so much effort to spin doesn't actually spin. Instead, you spin around it.
No way.
Does that change everything you've ever known, Annie?
Yes, and that feels like my world is crumbling.
Are you part of the multiverse now?
I don't know anymore.
And that's how you know you're part of the multiverse. The wheel itself is attached to one of those spinning platters, and the wheel teacup itself spins around the wheel itself.
I can't get over it. I feel like I've been lied to this whole time.
Well, just wait till we get to Autopia. Anyway, notice how I put that little teaser in there so people will still listen 7 years from now when we finally get to Autopia.
We'll never get to Autopia. Go ahead.
Throughout the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the teacups went largely unchanged. There were a few modifications in the 1972 and 78 refurbishments, but the majority of the stuff that went on during those were mostly cosmetic changes. Now, it wasn't until 1982 that the Mad Tea Party got that major overhaul it was needing.
Yes, that's right. So in 1982, the teacups would say goodbye to its original location behind King Arthur's Carousel and inch its way over to the location it's in now, right by Alice in Wonderland and the Matterhorn.
For some reason, I personally just cannot fathom the Mad Tea Party behind King Arthur's Carousel. I mean, obviously, I was born in 1985, so the teacups had been at the new location for 3 years by the time I was begat. So that's why I think that it's really difficult for me to grasp that. But there's probably a ton of people who listened to our show who went there pre-1982 and were like, those dang teacups are in such a weird place.
Yeah, yes. I'll have to ask my aunt about it because she went to Disneyland in 57.
Ooh.
And she's been going on the regular since then, at least every couple years, 3 years. Yeah, I'll have to ask her. She told me the other day when we were there that she was like, yeah, I remember when certain jobs were for women and certain jobs were for men.
That was
And
the
I was
Jungle
like,
Cruise.
Yeah, but I just was like, wait, of course Disneyland probably had that, but it's never been like that since I can remember.
Well, as far as I know, I think that, I mean, gosh, wasn't it until like the early 90s that the Jungle Cruise only had male skippers?
I bet. I mean, probably. And I remember the sky buckets; those were all guys.
Honestly, well, I mean, were you born and raised in California, Andrea?
I was born in '86.
Where were you born?
I was born in Vallejo, California.
I don't know. You were only, I mean, what is that? What kind of drive is that down to?
It was an 8-hour drive usually growing up.
Okay. So it's about half the time that it took for us to get there.
Yes.
I mean, I grew up in a family that was largely humbug when it came to Disney, and I think that that's why I turned in the way that I did, because I'm so punk rock that I was just like Disney, 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 because my parents don't like Disney, Disney.
Yeah.
And so we never really went that often. So I don't have a lot of young memories of Disney back in the day. And this is going to be completely information that probably the only person that cares is myself. The only memory that I have of Disney when I was a kid, and I know the thing that sparked my love of Disney, was a book that my parents got at Walt Disney World when they went down in 1983, 84, something like that. It was a book celebrating Epcot. And I remember poring over that thing when I was little, just obsessing over every image that I could see in that Epcot book. And I think that's where the spark came. But
cool.
for me, I never had those experiences of remembering the park pre this, pre that necessarily until I started working there back in the mid-2000s.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and a lot has changed since then, too.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what's kind of crazy.
Without question. Without question.
And that's only been, just 10 years or so. A little
well, and
over 10 years.
It's amazing to see all the shuffling that happens, and it's amazing to see all the shuffling that has to occur when you move an attraction. You don't just move the attraction, you have to move everything around it as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, you do. So, like, when talking again about when the teacups moved, Imagineers also had to move the colorful lanterns that were above it, that we see today. They had to move all those. And to be honest, it just kind of seems to make sense where it resides currently. Like the little wooden glen on the backside of Fantasyland where it rests seems to just perfectly fit the ambiance, and it's just like that little golden afternoon.
I agree. And now we insert that part of the song right here.
So pretty butterflies kiss the tulips, and the sun is like a toy.
Things, again, haven't changed much since that 1982 refurbishment, but back in 2004, the attraction was modified to be a little safer by preventing the teacups from spinning so fast. Personally, I think that's fine. I think the level of spin is already sufficient to make one go mad.
Yes. In fact, I heard there was a case back in 1977 where a young woman from Encino, California, always Encino, rode the attraction, and after getting off her teacup, she became instantly mad. Mad as a hatter.
Yeah, Annie, I don't think that's true at all.
Oh, Al, it's true. In fact, it was me.
Annie, you're younger than I am, and I was born in the 80s.
It was me.
The Mad Tea Party has become such an iconic part of the Disney park canon that 5 of the 6 Disney parks modeled after Disneyland worldwide have a teacup attraction, with all 5 of them being located in Fantasyland. And all of the teacup attractions, sans one of them, have been part of the opening lineup of attractions for that park.
So needless to say, people around the world love motion sickness, I guess.
I think that is a very valid statement. And speaking of which, I think we should play a little game. A game that I call Worse Than the Teacups.
Ooh. Pick me.
This is a game where we try to find an attraction in Disneyland that makes you more sick than the Mad Tea Party.
Okay.
So, is there anything that you can think of in the entire park that makes you more sick than riding the teacups?
Yes. And this is new for me. This is new, just within the last 5 years.
That was like zero hesitation. That's like you were waiting for this.
Because it's a sad story.
Okay.
This is a sad story.
I love hearing sad stories in your life.
When I was a child, Alex, all I wanted was to be tall enough to ride Space Mountain. Ooh. And once I was tall enough, I rode Space Mountain. I would ride it every night till midnight. You know, the last hour that the park is open, I would be that weird kid that's like, Space Mountain again. And now, Space Mountain is one of my least favorite rides because I feel miserable after.
Really?
I am no longer that passionate kid that just wanted to stay at the park till midnight. Now I'm like, no, Space Mountain sucks. Let's go to bed. It's 10 p.m.
But in reality, there's got to be some place in your heart that longs for Space Mountain again.
Kind of.
Does it make you like? Does it make you the same teacup sick, or does it just? Would you throw up if you rode it?
It doesn't make me want to throw up. It gives me a headache.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah, like a really massive headache.
Well, and that's something that my wife is sitting here reading a book in the living room while we record this episode, and this is something that I hesitate to say around her because she'll use it against me. But over the last probably 15 times that I've gone to Disneyland, I get a massive headache every time we're there usually. And I used to just think, well, it's because you're walking a lot and you're eating lots of sugar and all this kind of stuff. And part of me has Sherlock Holmes'd it to start thinking, well, maybe it's some of the rides.
No.
Yeah. I don't know if it's true. She just said that I'm getting old. We should actually, instead of playing this What Makes You Sicker Than the Mad Tea Party, we should just call this Geriatric Corner at Disneyland. A guide for the elderly. Don't go on the rides because they make you feel yucky. Don't eat none of the food because it's going to make you feel yucky. Don't go nowheres without a bottle of water, otherwise it's going to make you feel yucky. Essentially, you're going to feel yucky no matter what, so you might as well just throw your money in the garbage can.
Yeah. Make sure your fanny pack is stuffed with the 3 essential items. Your water bottle, a laxative, and a poncho. And don't leave home without it.
It's funny because even at this age right now, I don't leave home without all 3 of those things. I'm trying to think.
What brand laxative do you use, Al?
I can't think of any laxative without thinking about the movie Three Ninjas. And hopefully everybody knows what I'm talking about in the scene of Three Ninjas, where they give the laxative to the pizza delivery thieves. But I digress from our game. I'm trying to think of a ride that makes me more woozy. And I'll say this. The only thing that makes me more, like, queasy feeling than the teacups is probably that split second when you watch the goat all the way around the Big Thunder turn.
Good one.
Yeah.
That was such a good choice.
I think that's the only thing that makes me as queasy as going on the teacups.
And for people who don't quite know, you might if you've listened to past episodes, but there is a little fun trick to do, which is when you're going on the second crest, I believe, right? The second B mountain.
It's
B, I think. Yeah, on Big Thunder Mountain.
Yes, it is
If
B.
you see the goat, you don't let your eyes go off the goat as you turn that corner, and it gives you a really weird feeling in your tummy.
It gives you a crazy rush. It's the goat rush.
Yeah, the goat rush.
My wife said
and the funny thing is, Al, you're yeah.
No, go ahead. The funny thing
I was
is
say,
what?
Al, you're 33 years old, 32, 33.
I'm 33.
And the goat makes you feel really, really bad, but you still watch the goat.
I have a problem, Annie. I have a major problem, and it all stems from the goat. I'm compulsively drawn to that goat.
You can't not look at the goat. Okay.
So what do you say we wrap this episode up with? I'm going to give a good farewell talk here, okay? It's going to be it's going to be slick. It's going to be almost like I wrote it down.
Okay. You know
All
what?
right, this
you
is
do it. We're done.
This is going off the cuff. Off the cuff. Here we go. The Mad Tea Party attraction is an iconic attraction in the Disney Parks canon that reminds us that complexity is not always the thing that wins the hearts of fans. The draw of an attraction isn't always found in how much it pushes technological boundaries or what kind of intellectual property it represents. This simple attraction beckons riders to enter its world and simply spin in a teacup. But this simple act draws countless millions of guests in and leaves them with memories both magical and queasy that will last a lifetime.
Wow. Off the cuff, Al. You're incredible. Well, I guess
I
that's
do
the
what I
story. Yeah. Yeah, you do well. And that's all we have on the Mad Tea Party, I guess. So, if you liked this or any of our other episodes, please consider leaving us a friendly review on Apple Podcasts. And those reviews actually help us out a lot. So we appreciate them.
Yes.
And you can also feel free to give us a follow on Instagram if you like, or join our Facebook group by searching for the Backside of Water podcast on both of those social medias.
Also, feel free to check out our sister show, Did You Know Disney, where we explore any and every story found within the Disney universe.
So we pride ourselves on taking a grand circle tour of the park on this show, but with the way Fantasyland is laid out in a cluster, the circle tends to break down in the literal sense. So we've decided to physically backtrack and explore the other side of the Fantasyland cluster now, with our next episode focusing on the quaint little choo-choo, the Casey Jr. Circus Train.
I'm really excited to explore this attraction because if I'm being completely honest, I can say I've never actually ridden Casey Jr.
Al! What have you done?
What are you talking about?
Why did you just go and say that out loud?
What, that I haven't ridden Casey Jr.'s...
Stop. If they hear you, there will be trouble, okay?
They who? Wait, who could that be?
It's them.
Who?
Yes, I'm looking for an Alex Stewart.
You mean Stewart?
It says here on my paperwork, Stewart. Can I assume you are Mr. Stewart?
I'm Alex Stewart.
Close enough, sir. I'm Henry Hannibal Highbrow of the International Purist Advisory Council Internet Branch. And we just caught wind of something very, problematic.
What's going on here?
Do you or do you not claim to be a huge fan of Family Fun Park Disneyland?
That would be a yes, for sure.
And can it be confirmed that you just professed on this podcast that you have not ridden on the Casey Jr. Circus Train?
That would also be a yes.
Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me.
What? Why?
Sir, according to the bylaws of the APIC, a quote-unquote huge fan that has professed being a quote-unquote huge fan of the family amusement enterprise of Disneyland Park is required to have ridden every ride and attraction within the berm walls of said enterprise.
Wait, is this serious?
I'm afraid it's serious enough that you will have to come with me, sir.
Now, wait a second. Just because somebody hasn't ridden every ride in the park doesn't mean they can't call themselves a huge fan. Fandom lies within the heart of the fan, and nobody has the right to call that huge fandom into question.
You personally will have to take that up with the heads of the IPAC. Now, please come with me.
And Annie, help!
Al, I'm coming, okay? Folks, as you exit, please watch your head, watch your step, and if you happen to miss your step and hit your head, please just watch your language, okay? Whatever. Goodbye! Al, don't tell them anything. We'll get you out of this.